nearly a year into taking full power over the government, the Republican Party continues to get more and more unpopular. Yeah, apparently they have taken their newfound power and they've done about nothing with it. At least nothing positive. And the American people are starting to notice. Now, according to a new Suffolk poll, registered voters are increasingly turning away from the Republican Party and surprisingly turning to the Democrats in order to try and solve some of the nation's biggest problems. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's going to do anything with the current state of the Democratic Party, but they seem to be interested in, at least the American people, seem to be interested in turning it a bit back to more liberal solutions. Wonderful. Now, especially wonderful if all the progressives that are running in 2018 manage to pull off midterm primary wins against incumbent corporate Democrats. Now that is, that's going to be interesting and actually very good, I think, on policy grounds. Now, let me give you more details in this poll. Now, this was released on Thursday, and it shows that 62% of respondents now have an unfavorable view of the GOP. Now, that's an increase of about 7 points since the same poll was taken back in June. Just under half, 48%, feel the same way about Democrats. So, look, yes, the Republican Party is doing far worse on unfavorability. The Democrats are still also doing fairly bad, but not nearly as bad as the Republicans. So, I mean, take that as it is. The Republican, or the Democratic Party, I should say, has a lot of work ahead of it if it's actually going to get a majority of the American people that are actually in favor of it. Again, I mean, there's this huge trust deficit going on with the Democratic Party for running too establishment, too corporate, and that's an entirely different conversation. Now, for the Republicans, apparently it only took their attempt at governance to make them even more unpopular than they already were. Now, the poll found that 43% of voters now look to congressional Democrats to protect families when it comes to health care, compared to 15% who trust President Trump on health care, and less than 10% who say the Republican Party should lead the way. So that right there is a direct result and response to the Republicans' health care pitch. Now, their whole pitch was, let's get rid of Obamacare and put something worse in its place. Oh, wonderful. You know how that turned out? It turned out that that plan was incredibly unpopular. People did not like that. People were like, the ACA is not fantastic, but it's better than that pile of shit over there. Like, what is this? It had high risk pools and higher deductibles, higher premiums, less coverage. So yeah, it was a pretty shit plan. And at some point, I believe they had, and there's so many different versions of the ACA repeal bill, but most of them were less than 20%, had less than 20% popularity, favorability. So it's a disaster. So now it turns out that the worst thing for Republicans is letting them have a chance at doing policy. No, look, they couldn't get a lot of policy done because they do have a slim majority in Congress. I understand that. But remember, they did have a way of trying to squeeze in through pieces of legislation. They tried to use budget reconciliation to push through these ACA bills. So all they needed was Republican votes, and they still couldn't do it because a lot of Republicans were like, hey, I can't vote for this because I'm going to get slaughtered back home. Now, as far as their policies go, and they're working on this, it's cutting taxes for the rich and corporations. Some corporate Democrats also agree with that. Deregulation of industry, putting more money into the military, of course, and screwing regular people over on healthcare. Again, we got to be fair and point out how some of the corporate Democrats also agree with deregulation, especially when it comes to Wall Street, and putting more money into war. Again, I've got to stress that it was a vote of 89 members of the Senate voting in favor of giving an $80 billion increase into the defense budget. No, awful. It's a disaster. And look, those are not very popular positions. And of course, when the country pushes bad policy out, people generally tend to blame the party that's in charge. And right now that is the Republicans. Mostly they look at the president, and since the president's a Republican, they're blaming the Republican Party. So how bad is it? Well, according to Suffolk University poll director David Palilogos, that's a hard one. He said the Republican Party is in free fall. He said in March, the GOP had a 48% unfavorable rating. In June, the negative swelled to 55%. Today, the GOP unfavorable is 62%. What's next? Well, look, there is no, there's no bottom to that barrel. There is no limit to that sky that they can hit in unfavorability, okay? It turns out the Republican Party is actually pretty inept and actually very ineffective at governing, but that's kind of the whole point of the modern Republican Party. That's who they are. The GOP is the anti-government party. All they do is exist to tear down government. It's not to make your life better. It's not to make your life easier. It's to actually eliminate government, sell it, privatize it, give it away to corporations, and make it easier for corporations to make unlimited amounts of money. Now, Trump is kind of different from that. Now, Trump doesn't care at all about policy. He doesn't understand policy. He doesn't get into the nuance. He doesn't care about any of that. No, what Trump cares about is if he's winning. Well, how's he doing on that regard? He is apparently not winning. More than half of respondents say Trump has not delivered on his promises. Nearly 57% of respondents say they want to see a Congress elected in 2018 that will stand up against Trump. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote for Democrats, but it could mean that they're voting for more. I guess if they're continuing to call Trump an anti-establishment figure, well, then it seems to me that more people would be like, okay, well, we'll vote for the establishment to challenge Trump. I don't know if I'm correct on that one, but that's kind of where I see it possibly going. So now, not only that, but 33% want Congress to cooperate with Trump and his legislative agenda. But these numbers, they're a disaster. Not only that, but Trump's unfavorable rating has actually also increased to 57% since the last poll. It's just over a third. Now, 34% of respondents, that third, say that they view Trump as in his administration favorably. So those are not good numbers. And finally, almost two-thirds of the country, 64%, say America is now on the wrong track. Not very good. And that number has, of course, increased since the last time that they did this poll. So look, this is an absolute train wreck, right? Now, add in the fact that there are progressives now all over the country that are starting to win in small races, sometimes with help from the Democratic Party, sometimes without that help from the Democratic Party. Well, we could have a very, very interesting upcoming midterm on our hands if these progressives continue to win. And they are winning all over the country. In fact, we did a story on an Alabama mayoral race just earlier. And then we've got others, New York, Christine Pellegrino, again, Sanders-backed candidate. So there are victories across the country that are it's looking good for progressives, not so much for Democratic establishment candidates, but for progressives. So now that's not to say that we're going to see a progressive wave in 2018. I don't know. I hope we do. But again, there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. However, if it keeps going on this trajectory, with the Republicans getting more and more unpopular and progressives continuing to rack up small victories, then we might have a very good 2018. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.